the insurrection by the violent left targeting the United States of America. That's what's going on right now. We had major rioting going on in major cities. New York City has been under siege, practically speaking, all week. In Washington, D.C. here, our city had been under siege until the president intervened with law enforcement and military support to put the rioters in check. Much of the violence is associated with the Antifa left-wing movement. And of course, you have hangers-on who are just there to loot because that's what criminals do. Now, there's nothing wrong with peaceably assembling to make your grievances known. That's a God-given right enshrined in the Constitution. You don't have a right to commit insurrection. You don't have a right to kill people. You don't have a right to loot. You don't have a right to burn. You don't have a right to commit violent acts. You don't have a right to attack buildings and attack government. You don't have a right to assault the White House complex. And certainly, when you're doing that in coordination in an attempt, evidently, to overthrow the government, it's insurrection. So you've had governors, or actually mostly big city mayors, who have, especially in New York City, refused to assert the rule of law. It's not even asserting the rule of law. It's just having the government do its core duty, which is to protect the lives of citizens. It wasn't happening in New York City. And for a time, it wasn't happening in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you've seen all the video of what was going on outside the White House with the assaults in Lafayette Park, the burning of St. John's, which is a church that's called the Church of Presidents. It's a wonderful old church across the street from the White House. You have the mayor here in D.C. Resisting law enforcement efforts, attacking the president for insisting on the rule of law in the nation's capital. It's a terrible situation, and the president tweeted out that he's going to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization. Well, certainly it is an organization, and it is terrorist. And for years, it's been engaging in acts of terrorism, acts of sedition, seditious conspiracy. And as I tweeted out the other day, they've been doing it for years, but the FBI and the Justice Department were too busy engaging in their own seditious conspiracy against the president. And so it's good to see Attorney General Barr at least start talking about enforcing the rule of law against these leftists. And you hear this leftist media, I'm calling it the Antifa media, which is justifying violence, supporting insurrection, pretending that Antifa isn't, quote, an organization. It's not organized. Either they're lying or ignorant. I mean, we know directly that Antifa is real. We litigated against them. Let me be clear. They sued us. Antifa sued Judicial Watch. We were asking for documents about one of their violent members in California. She worked as a school teacher. She had been arrested for violent acts. I think she's been convicted. I don't recall, but it's pretty clear the rule of law was coming down on her for her violence. So we wanted emails about what she was doing on school time, school emails with this organized act of violence that she was involved in. So lawyers for her came in and sued us. The lawyers aren't armed by any means necessary, which is an Antifa organization. So literally, the group has lawyers that work for them directly. But instead, the president's being attacked for trying to suppress the insurrection in Lafayette Park, for highlighting the ability of the President of the United States under the Insurrection Act and the Constitution to intervene where necessary to protect the safety of citizens. Now, I pray the worst of this insurrection is past. But let me just say this. I think it's all part of the coup. It began during the Obama administration with the illegal spying, and then a sedition after President Trump was elected by trying to prosecute illegally General Flynn, trying to put the president in jail. You had the Kavanaugh nominations, which saw violence and intimidation, trying to keep Kavanaugh off the Supreme Court. And then you had the impeachment coup attack, where you had the foreign policy establishment conspire against the president, leak information, misstate what we basically attack his ability to do his job as representative of the United States in foreign affairs, try to remove him from office for asking questions about the corruption of Joe Biden and the Obama gang that was targeting him in concert with the Ukraine government at the time. I mean, they take the position that they should be able to decide, the deep state does, who should be in office. And now their leftist allies are out there rioting, using violence to achieve political results. And you may say, well, they're not getting any results. Well, they are getting results. You see reports of police agencies changing policy. It's nothing to do with public safety. It's all politics. You had the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, who's a radical leftist. Radical. It's been tied to Antifa directly. He came in and he's taken over the prosecution of the officers involved in George Floyd's death. Now, you may recall there was an initial charge tied to third-degree murder and manslaughter. So Ellison comes in and he changes the charges, adds additional charges, or adds charges against the officers that were there with Officer Chauvin, and increase the severity of the charge against Chauvin. Now, you may say, well, that's good, right? Well, it may not be good in the sense that the charge may not stick, because Ellison made a political decision in a way that will result in Chauvin possibly not being convicted as a result. So if you want justice for Mr. Floyd, you may not get it with this radical running the prosecution. And now they're talking about eliminating the ability of the police to use chokeholds, to use restricting their use of force, and all sorts of other further restrictions. This is, by the way, as police are under assault and being murdered daily by these rioters. The problem isn't the police. Yes, we had a police officer who the evidence shows engaged in excessive force, likely leading to the death of the person. And he's being charged. And to say police officers can't now use, for instance, a technique used to subdue suspects without the use of deadly force, you know what that means? It means, in my view, police officers will be forced more often to resort to deadly force to resolve situations that can be used by physically restraining someone. That's what's going to happen. And what's that mean? It means both police and suspects are more likely to be injured and killed. So under the guise of controlling the police, what they're doing is actually making the public less safe. Of course, now they've moved even beyond restraining the police. You see these leftists talk about defunding the police or banning police forces, ending police forces in their entirety. So when I talk about insurrection, you've got insurrection even within the system here. Destroying rule of law, just destroying it. I have a book coming out for Judicial Watch later this year. And the book is called Assault on Our Republic. Now, came up with the title before the riots, but isn't it apt? I fear for the future of our country. You see, the left has zero interest in following the rule of law. We have the mayor of our nation's capital battling with the president over his prerogatives as commander-in-chief to secure the district. The district, which, by the way, is run by the federal government under our Constitution. Yeah, they changed this home rule, which gave district residents the right to elect a city council, other local officials, and the mayor. But you can see that home rule is a farce and was an abdication of Congress's constitutional duty to run the district. And now you can see why a nation's capital shouldn't be subject to the whims of an official elected by the capital residents. An official has no accountability to the rest of America. It's America's city. It's a constitutional creation. No other city in the country is like it. It's not a state, can't be a state. And if I were the president, I would look into removing the mayor. Under law, of course, but removing her. Federalize the police force, which is what he specifically has the legal authority to do under federal law. Federalize it. What do you think was going to happen if those protesters got into the White House? There's these Friday night riots. Supposedly the president was moved into his protective, secure location in the White House. Do you think the Secret Service did that because they didn't think that he was at risk? If protesters overwhelmed forces around the White House during this insurrection, they would have killed the president if they got through. They would have killed him. So don't lecture me about protests that are, quote, mostly peaceful. Because the part that isn't peaceful could destroy our republic. You see in the major media coming down on the side of Antifa. You had Tom Cotton write a piece in the New York Times talking about the need to enforce the Insurrection Act, which is an old law that allows deployment of forces where appropriate to protect the public safety, military forces. And then you have General Mattis attack the President of the United States. I'll tell you what, if I were the president, I'd fire the whole lot of them in the Pentagon, every general. I just presume that Mattis is a stalking horse for every general over there in the Pentagon. And the problem with the president is he's got to rely on the same group of agencies that were trying to illegally spy on and jail him to protect him and the nation from insurrection. Certainly Barr knows what's happening. Wray, I don't know what Ray's doing. As I said, the FBI, I don't trust to be able to do much of anything these days, even though we may need them to do the work. They're not going to do anything on Antifa. And they barely could. Even those terrorist incidents where they would come back after this, we'd find out after the fact that the FBI had been warned 6 ways to Sunday about the terrorist or the lone wolf. So we're facing a crisis, and I hope the worst of it is past. I think the president really, and I appreciate the DC National Guard, the South Carolina National Guard, the Utah National Guard, and whoever else has been sent up here to protect this city. Because we think that city was we saved the city because of it. The city was saved because of it. Our district, our national capital. It could have been lost. It could have been lost. So they're going to use this as a crisis to continue to affect policy change, and they're going to try to use violence to affect the policy change. The left is. If you want to see the cynicism of it, I mean, we're told we can't breathe outside without a mask. We have to stay 6 feet away from everybody. You go to church, you're in danger of being arrested. You congregate here in the District of Columbia with more than 10 people, you're in danger of being arrested. But as soon as a protest arises that the political left-wing class that is tyrannizing the population with needless coronavirus shutdowns happens, all that's thrown out the window. I mean, you had the governor of Michigan, who's notorious for having her absurd shutdown policies challenged. She's out there hand in hand with protesters. Now, I think there's no health risk from that or negligible. People want to be able to protest, and they should be able to protest within the law. So I'm not worried about the public health, but it shows you the lies that we've been told in terms of the alleged concern that these leftist governors and local mayors have had about coronavirus. What should be done? Home rule should be restricted or reformed here in the District of Columbia, so no future mayor, including this one, can ever get in the way of protecting the safety of our nation's capital from an internal insurrection. Local officials should focus on Antifa organization in their communities, infiltrate and Antifa. Antifa, I mean, there's no organized terrorist activity or illegal activity that would, with any modicum of law enforcement resources, be allowed, be able to function. I mean, they just can't do it. I mean, as soon as the FBI focuses on it for real, as soon as local police focus on it for real, Antifa's over. It's over. The fact that it's been able to prosper and grow and be as effective as it's been is a result of failures by law enforcement to use the tools available to them to easily curtail and control. I mean, that's what's so frustrating about a lot of this, is that we see these problems, but it doesn't take a lot of effort to solve them. I mean, just look at Judicial Watch, what we're able to do. We're a nonprofit entity, a 501c3. I got me, I got my colleagues, I got our investigators, I got our team of lawyers. We got about 50, 60 people working in our company at Judicial Watch. All get money, voluntary contributions from maybe many of you watching. Hundreds of thousands of Americans. And look what we're able to do. We can hold government agencies to account. We can change history with Hillary Clinton. We can protect the president from being overthrown by pressuring and highlighting the corruption behind the coup effort against him. Just one group. We're not even a government group. We don't even get government money. The only government money we get is when we beat the government. They sometimes give us attorney fees. And we spend trillions of dollars to secure the public safety, and look at what's going on. We have this left-wing group being allowed to metastasize and prosper within our nation's capital. So that needs to be addressed in a forthright manner. And the president should continue to assert his authority under the Constitution to protect the public safety. Like I said, I think the worst of it may have passed, but there could be major demonstrations again this weekend. We don't know. And the way Keith Ellison is handling that prosecution of the police officer, I'm not confident that's going to result in an outcome that isn't going to lead to more civil unrest, where you will have protests expressing outrage or concern about the outcome, which is fine. But with that, you'll have the Antifa and the left-wing radicals and others engage in insurrection to try to overthrow our government. That's what it's about. Antifa doesn't, people say, Antifa, why are you doing this? People say they don't support the First Amendment rights of others. They don't support justice for Mr. Floyd. They just don't support it. They see it as a vehicle to overturn our system. They're communist revolutionaries. They are communist revolutionaries. And media that give them aid and comfort should be called out on it. Politicians that give them aid and comfort should be called out on it. And they should be investigated and jailed. And it will go, as I said, it will go away, and then they'll be back again with the next excuse. It's not Trump. They were around before Trump. They were around during Obama. Occupy Wall Street, that's Antifa. All these leftist politicians were bowing down to Occupy Wall Street. The left has always had an element of violence that it goes to achieve its political ends. And the traditional conservative right, they don't. It doesn't mean there aren't so-called rightists who aren't violent or terrorists. You see some of these crazed racists who are, I think, unfairly, incorrectly deemed to be conservative. There's nothing conservative about it. So pray for America, everybody. Pray for America. And you can bet Judicial Watch will do what we can under the law to preserve the rule of law, like as long as we're still able to. Like I said, your capital was under attack. The heart of New York was under attack. Even small towns were under attack by leftist radicals.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.